Throughout time, roller coasters have come and gone. Only some become legends for their intensity and thrills. Each and every year, coaster fans like you venture to the parks, searching for that one special ride that stands out above the rest. You submitted your rankings, and now it's time to reveal the group of elite roller coasters that you have voted as the best of the best. COASTER-net Uncut is proud to present the 2017 Thrilling 32.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the next round of the Thrilling 32 Bracket Challenge here on COASTER-net Uncut. I am Danny Miller from just outside of Binghamton, New York, in a little town we call Green here. I always say it's Binghamton, but I'm really in the little town of Green in New York, just outside of Binghamton. And Andy, where are you coming to? Always from Chicago, but what's your town name? You have a weird. You probably don't want to tell people.
You know what? I don't need people stalking me, Danny Miller. If you want people knocking on your front door, that's lit up with different colors, that just happens to be on this street.
Right, that's how they'll find it.
If you want people knocking on your door, Danny, I don't need people knocking on my door, because you know what? I've received a lot of hate mail over the last few weeks about this Thrilling 32. These Ohio people out there telling me how the Beast is amazing, how, I should love the Beast more.
Well, it's we made it through 2 rounds.
You know what? I'm tired of it, and finally, I think I'm going to get some redemption here this evening, because the Beast, I can't wait to see what happens in this round, because I think the Beast is going to get destroyed. But anyway, Danny, I said at the end of the last show that the Sweet 16 might have been one of the more boring rounds we've ever had in the Thrilling 32. But that changes tonight, because this round, I think, is going to be a lot more heated, some really great matchups here tonight. And Danny, yes. I can't wait to see who moves on one step closer to getting the Thrilling 32 Bracket Challenge Championship and crown for the Wood and Steel. I'm excited.
That's right, and that's what we're here tonight. We're narrowing it down from the Elite 8 in both brackets down to the Final 4. So we will be down to just 4 coasters in the wood side and 4 on the steel side after tonight. So what do you say we jump right into it with the wood coaster bracket? Let's start where we always do. Let's start in that Derby Racer region. And our matchup here for a spot in the Final 4 is between Ravine Flyer 2 from Waldameer Park in Erie, Pennsylvania, and the Voyage at Holiday World in Santa Claus, Indiana. Now, this is interesting because you always like to call Ravine Flyer 2 the poor man's Voyage. It's made by the Gravity Group just a few years after Voyage came out. Has a little bit of a similar style, as a 90-degree turn in there, has some good airtime, but it is less than half the length, really, of Voyage. It's really kind of like half a Voyage, a little bit smaller, a lot shorter, not quite as fast, maybe not quite as intense or wild, but a good terrain ride like Voyage is. And as you can see in the side-by-side here, Voyage has always been number 1 or number 2. It was the runner-up last year, and also the first 2 years in 2014 was the number 1 wood coaster. Ravine Flyer 2 has always been hovering right outside the top 5. It's been 6 a couple times, including last year. It's been number 8. It's been number 7 at one point. Do you see things changing here, or do we see Voyage move on?
Danny, I understand Ravine Flyer has a great base of fans. Ravine Flyer has done well in other polls over the years. Sometimes, I believe, even besting one Voyage roller coaster. But the fact of the matter is that the Voyage goes far and above anything that Ravine Flyer does. I just as I do not understand the people who sit there and say that Outlaw Run is better than the Voyage, I just as well do not understand those people who say that Ravine Flyer 2 is better than the Voyage. I just don't see it. Ravine Flyer 2, a really good roller coaster. Nothing to take away from that. But when put up against a ride like the Voyage, I don't think there's any comparison, to be honest with you, Danny.
Right, and again, I'm a big fan of Ravine Flyer too. It is, I can't remember if it's in my top 10 or if it's just outside my top 10. I think it may have been bumped out of my top 10 after riding Lightning Rod, but very good roller coaster, but it's not the Voyage, as you said. It is Voyage. Moving on to the Final Four once again. So the Voyage moving on to the Final Four for the 5th consecutive year, and that is good news for the Voyage fans and the Holiday World fans. Voyage moving on to the Final Four here in the Derby Racer region.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's see who Voyage is going to end up playing, and it will play the winner of the Speedo Plain region, and I can already see that little smirk on your face here because this is where we see the Beast from Kings Island going up against El Toro from Six Flags Great Adventure. What's many, probably the majority of the participants here considered the upset of the first round, taking down the defending champion of Outlaw Run. That was El Toro winning that one. And then taking down Rampage, which was a surprise visitor to the Elite Eight last year, and is a ride that, you and I have both ridden and both have very, very high on our lists. Rampage, another one of those wood coasters that is in both of our top 10s. That is, you and I don't often agree on this show. We've agreed on this show before, but Rampage is one of those rides that you and I do absolutely agree on. And El Toro took down Rampage, and it's taking on the Beast now, which kind of came out of, I guess, what you would call a weak half of this bracket. You had Beast upsetting Legend in the first round. I would call that an upset for sure. And then American Thunder, which beat Raven. The Beast also beat American Thunder. So, not really too tough of competitors there, I think. Certainly not in American Thunder. You could see the Beast maybe winning that one. But does the Beast have any shot of knocking off El Toro and going to the Final Four here?
Danny Miller, get out your hankies, get out your tissue. It's time to start the waterworks because the Great Beast is coming to an end. Just as if you were to actually ride it, you'd probably fall asleep about halfway through. It's made it through this far, but people are done with it. We want to get off. The second lift till is too much. We want to get off the ride and move on to other things. Danny, it's over. The line is done. El Toro is moving on. Thank goodness for that.
Yes, it is El Toro. As we showed in the side-by-side comparison, you can see El Toro had always been either number 3 or 4. The Beast was number 17 last year, so it shouldn't be much of a surprise that we do indeed see El Toro moving on. So, interestingly enough, in this half of the wood bracket, we will now see a rematch of last year's semifinal matchup in the Final Four between Voyage and El Toro. I do believe those two coasters did go up against each other in the Final Four last year. Voyage was victorious and moved on to the finals before being beaten by Outlaw Run. So now we'll see if El Toro can get its revenge, or if Voyage will once again go to the championship match, but we'll leave that for next week. So let's go off to the other side of the wood bracket now. We will go to the Flyer Comet region. And once again, we have a former champion of this poll in Boulder Dash from Lake Compounce, going up against one that did very well last year in its first year in the Thrilling 32 and is once again making noise here, making it to the Elite Eight. It is Colossus from Hyde Park in Germany. Now, we look at the side-by-side here in 10 as well. You see Boulder Dash, the very first year of this poll, was the champion, then was number 3 the following year, and then number 4 the last 2 seasons. Colossus at Hyde Park not having enough riders and votes to qualify up until last year. Last year was the first year it made it to the poll and finished at a very respectable number 8. So it would make sense that we would see Colossus make it back to the Elite 8 here because obviously this is a random number generator that creates this bracket, which is how we ended up getting, matchups like El Toro and Outlaw Run in the first round. But if you're in that top 8, the odds are in your favor that you're going to get to, at least to the Elite 8, maybe even to the Final Four. So Boulder Dash last year, number 4. Colossus number 8. Does Boulder Dash stay ahead? Does Colossus maybe, we know we had a lot of German voters this year. Does Colossus maybe jump up a few spots? Some people have started to complain about Boulder Dash getting a little rough in certain areas. What are your thoughts on this?
Boulder Dash is one of those rides that, a lot of people talk a lot of stuff about. I just never understand it. My issue with this matchup is I understand even less about Colossus not having ridden it. I do know that some people say it's a lot like El Toro, and people love that style of ride. Obviously, with El Toro moving on against the Beast just previously to this matchup. Right. But here, the question once again becomes, how many people have actually ridden Colossus? I know we had a lot of international voters this year, so will their votes overrank the love that Boulder Dash has, in the Americas? I don't know, Danny. I have a feeling I'm going to go with history here and say Boulder Dash is moving on.
Well, we like to often say in this poll that history can be the best teacher at times. History is a good teacher this time around. Boulder Dash is moving on to the Final Four once again. Boulder Dash, again, we don't know the full rankings until we get to the very end here. Boulder Dash has always been in the top 4, so it shouldn't come as much of a surprise that we do see Boulder Dash going on to the Final Four. Now we'll see at the last show if it was actually in the top 4. But Boulder Dash moving on from this region here. So now we will go to the 4th and final region and see who the 4th and final coaster going to the semifinals is here in the wood side of the 2017 Thrilling 32 Bracket Challenge. It is the Star Liner region. And I would have to think that maybe of all 4 Elite 8 matchups, this one might be the most intriguing because we've got a long-time perennial favorite, as we like to say, the Phoenix at Knoebels in Ellensburg, Pennsylvania, which is, we'll put it up here on the graphic. Number 6, then number 5, then number 7, last year number 5 again, going up against Lightning Rod from Dollywood. And we talked about this last show, how Lightning Rod took on Hades 360 and then took on Gold Striker. 2 coasters that, we have a very East Coast-centric audience in the United States, or an Ohio-centric type of audience. We are a very coaster-centric type of show, obviously, and we have a very heavy Ohio contingency. We have a very heavy East Coast contingency, because that's where I'm located. We have a very strong Chicago Midwest contingency, because that's where you're located. And Hades 360 is one of those rides that's very tough to get to. Even for the Midwest people, it's not that close. And a lot of people don't just make a trip up to Mount Olympus. Even the folks who live out by you, a lot of them have not been up to Mount Olympus. And then Gold Striker being that West Coast coaster, it's fairly new. People only make West Coast trips maybe once every 4 or 5 years, so a lot of people haven't gotten a chance to ride it yet. This is the first time Lightning Rod is going up against the coaster that we know historically is very good and is maybe in the top 5 most of the time, and also a ride that has a lot of riders. So is this where Lightning Rod hits a wall? Does Phoenix move on? Did enough people like Lightning Rod? Did enough people ride Lightning Rod to get it to the Final Four? Because if they did, and if Lightning Rod moves on here, I think all of a sudden, does Lightning Rod become the favorite to win this if it knocks off Phoenix, knowing how many people have ridden Phoenix and how loved Phoenix is?
Danny, I don't know who you listen to when you film these shows, but I've been saying that Lightning Rod has been the odds-on favorite since the very beginning to at least make it into the championship round on this side of the bracket. Now, I don't know what happens when it meets the other side of the bracket, because I think you have a lot of really good number 1 coasters that, are highly ranked in many different polls. Phoenix is a great coaster. People love Phoenix. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at those numbers that we just looked at, ranking 5th, 6th, and 7th doesn't really inspire me to say that it's going to have the staying power. The only thing working against Lightning Rod, is the number of people who have ridden it. But I got to say that Lightning Rod, I like Phoenix, but Lightning Rod is on a completely different level than Phoenix is. Phoenix is great for what it is. If you like classic wood coasters, that's a great ride. But the modern day wood coaster, Lightning Rod, does things that no other wood coaster does. So I've been saying it since round 1, Danny, that Lightning Rod is the pick. I did say that Phoenix might be the only coaster to even have a shot at knocking it off on this side of the bracket. But in fact, I'm sticking with Lightning Rod.
Well, it is Lightning Rod. Moving on to the final 4 of the wood bracket here in Thrilling 32 Bracket Challenge. So there it is. We have the final 4 set. Take a look at this real quick. Next week, you will see Voyage take on El Toro from Six Flags Great Adventure, a rematch of last year's semifinal. Then you will see Boulder Dash take on Lightning Rod. So now, I don't have last year's bracket up in front of me, but I do think that Lightning Rod is the only newcomer to the Final 4. I believe the other 3 were in it last year, or maybe Phoenix was in it last year. I can't remember. I do know Voyage and El Toro went up against each other, but I think Boulder Dash might have still been in it. Because Boulder Dash played El Toro in that first round. I forgot about that. I think it was Phoenix then on the other side. So instead of Phoenix, we see Lightning Rod replace Phoenix, and then obviously Outlaw Run is not in this year. So Boulder Dash making it back into the Final 4, and Lightning Rod denying Phoenix a return trip to the Final 4. I believe that's how it went. So between those four, do you have thoughts on the Voyage versus El Toro matchup and the Boulder Dash versus Lightning Rod matchup before we move on to Steel Coasters?
Well, I can tell you, Danny, that this I think we would both agree that this Final 4 is really 75% great. Now, me and you differ on which 75% it is. I say Boulder Dash doesn't. I say Boulder Dash doesn't belong here. You say El Toro doesn't belong here. But we both say 75% of this bracket is great. I'm sticking with Lightning Rod on the one side. Boulder Dash to me can't hold the candle to Lightning Rod. On the other side, what a matchup that is. That one is too close to call. I don't want to give you many thoughts, because I know I'm going to have all of next week to give you some really in-depth thoughts on the Voyage versus El Toro. So I don't want to spoil it now, Danny.
All right, fair enough. And I mean that's one we've talked about before. We've seen that one a couple times in the history of this poll. So it's a rematch from last year. So we'll have plenty of time to talk about that one next week. So let's get on to Andy's favorite. Let's get over to the Steel Coasters now. We'll move over to the Black Widow region. We have Fury 325, the defending champion, going up against Superman, the ride from Six Flags New England. Look at the side-by-side comparison. Again, 2 former champions, including the Fury 325, looking to keep its perfect run, essentially, going here. It has never lost a matchup in the Thrilling 32. Superman the Ride, number 4, its first 2 years as Bizarro, and then was the 2014 champion, and then in the 2015 poll was number 3 last year behind Fury and Intimidator 305. So, is there any question on this one? Is there any question? Even though they've both done so well, is there any question?
Danny, you can put whatever statements you want onto this. You can try and sell it to the listeners. I'm not going to give you the hard sell here. It's obviously Fury is moving on. Bizarro, Superman, call it whatever you want. It's junk. It's out of my life. Fury is so much better than that. Come on.
It is Fury moving on to the Final 4 from the Black Widow region. Not much of a surprise there, and not one that many people had incorrect. I don't know if anyone had that one incorrect, actually, now that I think about it. I'd have to go back and look, but most people correctly selecting Fury 325 to move on to the Final 4. And again, 59 people out of 73 submissions picking Fury as their overall champion. So several people happy that Fury is moving on here. So let's take a look at who Fury will take on now. It'll be the winner of the King Cobra region. And this one on paper is a little bit more of a mismatch on paper than you might initially think when you hear the matchup. We've got Phantom's Revenge from Kennywood going up against Intimidator 305 from King's Dominion. Now, if we look at the side-by-side comparison here, Phantom's Revenge historically has been somewhere in, the 12 to 20 range. Number 20, then number 14, number 18, and then last year number 16. Has done a little bit of bouncing around, but has always been in that mid to low teens range. And Intimidator 305, obviously, much like Voyage, has always been in the top 2. Was number 1 the very first, and has been the runner-up the last 3 years, losing to 3 different coasters, too, losing to Leviathan in 2013, then losing to Bizarro in 2014, and then obviously last year losing to Fury. So, again, on paper, this one's a mismatch. Does Intimidator 305 continue its strong performance in the poll here?
You would have to. I think we all love Phantom's Revenge, but at the end of the day, I think I-305 is by far the better ride here. I don't see any scenario where I-305 falls in this round.
Well, last year's championship was Fury versus Intimidator 305, and we will see that matchup in the semifinals this year. So we will get a rematch of last year's championship, this time in the Final Four, because it is Intimidator 305 moving on to the Final Four. So not much of a surprise there. Again, those are the two new big Cedar Fair Giga Coasters that tend to do very, very well in this poll.
Interesting.
So, Intimidator 305 will get a chance at revenge for last year next week. So let's move on to the Thunder Looper region, aptly named. And this, I think, is kind of, I don't know if you could call it the Cinderella region, but I think this was the one initially where you kind of had, if you were to just look at the 8 coasters that were in this region to start, it was the one region where one didn't immediately jump out at you and saying, that's the one going to Final Four. I think a lot of people looked at, Fury and said, that's the one. And a lot of people looked at maybe Intimidator 305 or Leviathan and said, that's the one going. This one, there didn't seem to be a real obvious choice. We had Full Throttle, Maverick, Accelerator, Tatsu, Storm Chaser, New Texas Giant, Nemesis, and Twisted Colossus. A lot of folks selected Twisted Colossus to go to the Final Four from this region, lost in the first round to Nemesis. And then Nemesis beat another RMC and New Texas Giant, Maverick beating 2 Six Flags Magic Mountain coasters, Full Throttle and Tatsu, to get here. So now Nemesis, which, again, if you look at this, has done very well. It first qualified in terms of ridership 2 years ago. Nemesis has been number 4 in the rankings both years it has qualified. That is certainly nothing to sneeze at. Maverick has been number 14, 15, 19, and then 13 last year. So on paper, again, this seems to be a little bit of a mismatch. And history would tell you, and history has been a pretty good teacher in this tournament so far, history would tell you that Nemesis might be going back to the Final Four here.
Yeah, this is a tough call. I don't envy those people who, have to make this call on paper because, once again, like you said, it's the history part that we know Nemesis does well traditionally in this tournament. But I think we all want Maverick to do well in this tournament. And it's trying to separate your feelings from reality. But then you have that extra piece in there that we know Maverick is moving up the rankings. And we know because of the soft restraints, more people like it, more people are accessing it. So is that enough to finally move it into the top tier of roller coasters? Danny, I don't know. I'm going to have to go with my
Here's the thing. And I'm looking at this, and I don't know if you still have it up on the screen, but I'm looking at the side by side here. Nemesis has been number 4 the last 2 years. It's been consistent.
Yeah.
We had a stronger European base this year, and that's what you've really. We've talked about that. We talked about it during the selection show. We've talked about it in each round. So we know that we had a heavy group of Europeans vote here. But like you said, Maverick is trending up. So here's the thing. Did maybe those European people don't like Nemesis as much? Maybe they voted it down. Maybe Maverick climbed up, and maybe there was just a little bit of a flip there. Maverick went up 6 spots last year from 19 to 13. So based off of that, it's still below Nemesis. But if there's enough of a flip and it continues to trend upwards, and you and I have always been very outspoken about Maverick and how Maverick deserves a lot more credit than it ever gets and probably will ever get from the coaster community because it's at Cedar Point. If it was at any other park in the country, it would. But hear me out here. If Maverick was at any other park besides Cedar Point, it would, without question, with the exception of maybe Carowinds, it would by far, without a doubt, be the best steel coaster in its park. And because Millennium Force has such the following, that always gets put into question because of the cult following of Millennium Force. The Maverick has a good following, but because it wasn't the big iconic thing, and it was just a really, really good roller coaster, it never got the cult following of Millennium Force. And that's something that's something that you and I have always talked about that Maverick should have, and it just doesn't. But it should, because quite honestly, you and I both agree it's the better ride. It's the best ride at that park.
I almost want to take it a step further and say that there is a general bias in the coaster community against any ride that goes upside down. I think that's another thing, that generally speaking, coaster enthusiasts, when they start talking about number ones and number twos, almost invariably, you will not see them have rides that go upside down in them. And Maverick doesn't go upside down once; it goes upside down multiple times, and has really intense, flipping elements in it. So, you look at something like I-305. People love it. Has the intensity of Maverick, but doesn't go upside down anywhere. And yet, and you see I-305
and has the same restraints now.
Has the same restraints. So I really think that, yes, the Cedar Point, mystique plays into this. It's why Millennium Force doesn't make, huge moves in some of the polls, and other polls it does. I think Maverick suffers from not only that, but I think more so from the fact that it has inversions in it, which a lot of people do not like, no matter what the restraints are, except if they're RMC fanboys. Then they apparently love them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, I think this was one of the most intriguing matchups just because it was one that was very hard to predict. I mean, we could have seen Fury versus Intimidator 305 coming in the Final Four. I don't think many people had, but I don't know, not many people had Maverick versus Nemesis here. But to quote the sign from that was put up during construction, are y'all ready for some serious sidewinding? Because Maverick is moving on to the Final Four in the thrilling 32. Maverick defeats Nemesis. Maverick from Cedar Point is going to the Final Four. Andy, I'll say it again. Maverick from Cedar Point is going to the Final Four. You and I need to give each other a high five right here, because Maverick is getting the credit it deserves in this poll, because this poll is not bullshit.
Danny Miller, do you believe in miracles? I do, because Maverick's moving on.
Yes, it is.
But
yes, it
Danny,
is. Maverick is moving on.
But just like the U.S. Olympic hockey team, it still has a few more games to play. So, yeah, they beat the Russians, but it's not over yet.
Well, not quite the Russians, but close. We beat the Brits.
No,
so, okay. Now this, if you're looking at a bracket right now, all of a sudden, Maverick winning that matchup made this last one a hell of a lot more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because when we go to the White Lightning region here, our matchup is Millennium Force from Cedar Point against Expedition G-Force from Holiday Park in Germany. Now, Millennium Force the last couple years has made some early exits. It's been a disappointment the last couple years in this poll. It's made it to the Elite Eight. It's one step away from the Final Four. Now, you and I talked about this last week. We talked about the potential that if Maverick were to pull off, let's face it, on paper, Maverick was the underdog. Maverick pulled off an upset in Nemesis. Now, you and I, neither of us have ridden both of those.
Yeah.
I will hopefully get to ride Nemesis in October on our England trip. But until then, I can't say which one I prefer more. But let's face it, Maverick was the underdog going into that matchup if you went off of previous years. Now we see Millennium Force going up against Expedition G-Force. Millennium Force was number 17 last year, a very uncharacteristically low rating last year, and Expedition G-Force was number 5, which is very high. But if you look at the year before, Millennium Force number 8, Expedition G-Force number 11. Expedition G-Force did not have enough riders before then. And I think the fact that Millennium Force has made it this far tells you that it probably wasn't as low as number 17 this year. I mean, it knocked off Blue Fire Mega Coaster, which has typically been right around the number 10 mark or so. Kumba probably a little bit lower. But you know, this is one of the classic comparisons. For years in the Golden Tickets, when Millennium Force was number 1, and then there was always talk about Expedition G-Force, and it didn't get the credit it deserved because it was overseas. And you know, it's always been number 3 for a long time, and now that Fury has moved up, it's number 4, but it's still in that discussion. This is one of the classic comparisons here, and holy crap. Let's think about the prospect of Millennium Force versus Maverick here for a second. Let's talk about that for a second. Could you imagine that?
It's too much to bear. It's too much to even think about. The fact that you would have an all Cedar Point, side of the Final Four, that really we've never seen these two rides cross paths before in the Thrilling 32. To have them meet in such an important matchup is really an awesome perspective.
And to make it an all-Cedar Fair Final Four.
Jesus, man.
With 3 Giga Coasters.
It's Patty's
and then
nightmare.
Into the mix.
Oh, my God.
You'd have an all-Cedar Fair Final Four. And then you'd have all 3 Giga Coasters, and then Maverick, which is the love child of 2 of them.
Yeah. Oh, my good Lord. Oh, there's so much, but even so, let's flip the script a little bit here, and if Expedition G-Force moves on, my God, Danny Miller, I think Expedition G-Force is a fine roller coaster. It's hard to tell how it's going to do against Millennium based on those numbers you just gave us, but we know Maverick's trending upwards. Does that mean that Maverick is going to play Expedition G-Force? And in that matchup, I have to imagine Maverick's got a really good shot of moving to a championship game. Holy cow, Danny Miller. Maverick, the ride that we both love, that we've been talking about forever, finally getting its just desserts. I don't know. Either way, I think this is exciting, but given the issue that we have in front of us, I gotta say, Millennium Force. I gotta figure. I think you're right about last year about it being uncharacteristic. Probably, the result of a few really low rankings.
Probably just an outlier.
Yeah. I gotta give my weight to Millennium Force on this one. So, who is it?
Well, I can tell you that it was built by Intamin.
Oh man!
And that the name is 2 words long.
Ooh.
And that the park is also 2 words long.
Wow, you're giving us a lot, Danny.
And the word force is also found in the name.
Holy cow! Oh, the similarities. Will they never stop?
The similarities are outstanding between these two rides, aren't they?
Holy cow.
Hang on to your hats. It is Expedition G-Force moving on to the Final Four from the White Lightning region. Yes, I said that correctly. Expedition G-Force from Holiday Park in Germany moving on to the Final Four. So here is the Final Four right in front of you here from the 2016 Ride Warrior Choice Awards as part of now the 2017 Thrilling 32 Bracket Challenge. Fury 325. Versus Intimidator 305, and Maverick versus Expedition G-Force. How is that for, would you say, an uncharacteristic yet very strong Final Four?
It's hard to choose one out of there. I've never been on Expedition G-Force. I've watched POVs. I've been somewhat impressed by the ride. I've been on the other three, obviously impressed by all three of those. It's uncharacteristic for us to find four really outstanding roller coasters in finding their way into the Final Four based on the way we do the brackets. But I think we have four right here. But man, I would be remiss if I didn't say I feel a little bit cheated tonight. Because I really thought we were going to have that Maverick, Millennium Force matchup. Would that
have not been the best thing ever? I mean, we would have had a week-long build-up to Millennium Force versus Maverick here. We would have had a week-long build-up to that matchup. I mean, there could have been riots, Andy. There could have been protests. There could have been presidential-esque debates.
I'll tell you what. There could have been an epic thread devoted for an entire week. Some of our epic threads go on for. Could you even imagine the epic thread that would be birthed out of the Millennium Force Maverick, matchup? But alas, we've been cheated. We do have a lot of Intamin here. And one B&M. It's kind of like which one of these coasters doesn't fit, and you can kind of pick any of them. You can say, well, Maverick's not the tall one. Expedition G-Force isn't the American one. Fury isn't the intimate one. So it's almost like there's a lot of which one doesn't fit. It's hard to tell, but man, this is an exciting Final Four. We might even put up some polls to find out what you guys think about which coasters. Now we know your brackets may or may not be busted, but I kind of want to see how you feel about this Final Four moving forward and who's going to win.
I would be interested in seeing. I would be interested in seeing, now that we have the matchups placed, I would be interested in seeing if we if we wipe the slate clean and gave everyone the brackets now with the two Final Fours, where they would pick, where they would end up picking. So maybe that's something we'll put up on a Facebook post, on Friday night or Saturday after this drops. Because I'd be really interested in seeing if people knew what the Final Four matchups were, where they would go with it. So really quick, let's take a look at the actual contest standings. My dad has been very, very vocal amongst our family the last couple weeks that he was leading the pack after the first two rounds. He has actually dropped down to third here. In this round, as you can see on your screen. He had 3 correct in the wood and 3 correct in the steel. Pretty good there. 3 correct in both is actually very, very good. Several people with 4 correct in at least one or the other. There was one person who had all 4 correct in both brackets, and that is Arthur Poor, who is now our new leader in the clubhouse. He is at 93 points. Yes. Arthur, I don't believe you or I know Arthur, so maybe we'll have to be getting in contact with him to be on the show. We'll see if he can hold the lead. But he had all 4 correct. So he earned the bonus points. He currently has 93 points and has made 48 correct picks overall. Now, what's interesting is that my dad also has 48 correct picks, but some of them were in the earlier rounds, so he only has 83 points, so he's 10 points behind. Nicholas is in second place with 84 points, so he is 9 points behind, only with 45 correct picks. But the important thing to note here is that one of Arthur's champions has already been eliminated. His steel champion has already been eliminated. So he can only possibly select the wood correct if Lightning Rod were to win. Nicholas has Lightning Rod and Fury as his two champions, and my dad has Fury and Voyage. So it's interesting that all three of the top three all have different pairings of champions. Look at this. In fourth place, our buddy Maverick Rob Dahl, sitting in fourth place right now. 83 points. He's tied in points with my dad, but also only has 46 correct picks. He has also selected Voyage and Fury as his champion. He had all 4 correct in the steel bracket and 3 of 4 correct in the wood bracket. So congrats to Rob there. Let's take a look at a few other folks. I'm trying to go down this list. Our buddy Brian V from down out in the Southwest there, he's dropped all the way down to 34th. He was way up there at the beginning. He has slid down. He has slid down the rankings a bit. Now, we also talked about one Brian Bass, who was ranked 5th after the first round.
And
he was in the top 5.
mind you, big talk across social media lately,
Big talk, yes.
Big talk.
Yes,
Big
a
talk,
lot of
Brian
smack
Bass.
talk coming from one Brian Bass.
Oh, yeah.
Now, he slipped to the number 20 spot after the second round, but look at this. After the third round, he finds himself wait, hold on. I got to scroll down a little bit.
Scroll down a little bit more.
All the way. He has slipped all the way to 57th place, only having 2 of the wood coasters and 1 of the steel coasters correctly. He must have written in Hulk somewhere in there.
Probably.
That is unfortunate for one Brian Bass. But, however, both champions still in the running, Lightning Rod and Fury 325. So, still maybe a chance there. And the other thing we like to update here is my family's personal rivalry. Again, my dad's sitting in 3rd currently. Now, my mom is down. Now, again, my mom, not a roller coaster rider for you folks. She purely went off of POV videos and photographs, pretty much, to make these selections. She's down in 55th, and my aunt is in 56th. So they are right next to each other there, towards the bottom of the bracket. Sue catching up a little bit. She had three correct in each. So that is very, very interesting. My mom selecting Nemesis as her champion. Nemesis falling in this round in the steel bracket. So that is so hers is knocked out there, but still has Lightning Rod alive in the wood side as well. Nemesis, the only coaster. Actually, we had Nemesis and then one person who selected Phantom's Revenge. That would be Dave Collins down there. So a couple people having steel champions knocked out. No wood champions being knocked out this time around. We still have 29 Lightning Rods, 25 Voyages, and 9 El Toros alive. And then on the steel side of things, we have 59 Furies, 4 Intimidator 305s, and 3 Mavericks are the ones alive. So interestingly enough, no Boulder Dash picks for champions. So Boulder Dash is still in it, and no Expedition G-Force selections for Steel Champion. So still a possibility that nobody could have the champions correct. A small possibility, but it is a possibility. So that's how the standings kind of look right now. Former champion Jenny Fiedler has also dropped down to 33rd after a strong start, and 3rd place after the first round. So. We've had a lot of shuffling. We've had a lot of people jump up the standings. We've had a lot of people drop down as well. But, it just goes to show you it's never over until it's over here in the Thrilling 32 Bracket Challenge. So, Andy, any thoughts before we leave the folks tonight to collect their tears and recoup and think about the exciting matchups we have coming next week.
Man, what a fun round this was. This was a really good round. I'm looking forward to the next rounds here because I think we're going to have even more fun, Danny. I'm excited. I know you're always excited. So I think that'll wrap us up here tonight. I'm, of course, Andrew Barchak from Chicago, Illinois.
And Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
And as always, right on, Ride Warriors.
Fire safety, kids. Fire safety. See you next time.